I'll tell you the story of how I got on this idea of native links. I'm writing a book called Native Links, but I'm going to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Nipmuc Nation on which we are working and currently performing. We recognize and respect Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. This acknowledgement is essential to the human rights work across the world. It is essential to our mission, I'm sure the library's mission as well, to explore the full human experience. So, yeah, again, delighted to be here, and I want to tell you about this project I'm working on, which began about a year and a half ago. I write for golf course architecture, and I have stuff in the Boston Globe as well. And I went down to Lake of Isles, which is in Connecticut at Foxwoods. And that is a native-owned golf course. And I went there because I was interested in the designer. The designer's name is Rhys Jones, who's the son of also one of the big figures in golf course architecture, Robert Trent Jones. And Rhys Jones lives in Milton. He and his brother have taken on the family business of designing courses, high-end courses. And I'm interested in the Jones brothers. And so I went down there, and I'm writing about Lake of Isles, and I'm like, this is kind of interesting that the tribes, with the resources from casinos, have museums now. The Pequot, Mashantucket Pequots have an award-winning museum, archives, schools, healthcare, and also golf courses, right? So for a golf nerd like me, I'm like, well, that's really kind of interesting, right? Because you don't, in fact, if you would advance the slide, when I tell people I'm writing a book on Native Americans and golf, the response is universally, golf? You know, the people can't believe it. And people just don't get that connection between golf and Native Americans. And it's really a very recent development, right? So Lake of Isles was the beginning of a movement, and now 55 tribes around the country have golf facilities. And in fact, I just got back. I'm going to tell you about it. I went to the Native American Open. There's a Native American Open. There was a third Native American Open in October, and I'll tell you about that as I go. But to a golf historian, no, you can leave that there. Golf for research nerds like me can be connected to everything, right? Babe Ruth, and there's a golf ball on the moon, right? The moonshot. Mary Queen of Scots was a golfer. And so for me, it's not surprising that we can connect it to the recovery of the tribes and some sort of justice for the tribes, right? Because I think we'd all been, as mature and educated people, I think we'd all agree that the Native Americans were experienced one of the worst historical crimes in history, right? And we're still trying to sort that out through sovereignty, through resources, and golf, amazingly enough. There's 562 tribes in the country, recognized tribes, and this is a book that I'm writing now for not only golf course architecture, I'm also writing for ICT, which is a news site, an indigenous news site called Indian Country Today. That's what they used to be known as. And I'll share some of those links with you later, but they're pushing this book. ICT is very much loving this book, which is a glimpse of the 562 tribes across the country. So anyway, let's try and make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to ask you a question. Here's your exam. When you think of Native American tribes of consequence, who do you think of and why?
Sitting Bull.
Sitting Bull. Right. Why Sitting Bull?
My hero.
He's your hero. Because?
I wish he had more ammunition.
Things would have been a lot different if Sitting Bull was running things today, for sure. Sitting Bull, he's the one who took down Custer, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, as I've gotten into this history, I mean, the history of broken treaties and murder, and I mean, has anyone seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet? We went and saw that. That's about the Osage murders, and in fact, there's a connection to golf, which I've written about, right? Because when the Osage struck oil and became the richest people in the world per capita for a while, for a short while. They built a golf course. They built a golf course by a fellow named Maxwell Perry, and they were driving nice cars, Pierce Arrows, and wearing jewelry and nice linens, and they wanted to learn how to golf as well. So I have a little section on that in my book. Yeah, but the history of the slaughter, the stealing of the land, broken treaties, like the U.S. government. In fact, that's kind of a challenge in my project, is because when they say, "Are you Native?" I'm not. I like to say I'm a poor white. Yeah, I'm a poor white boy from New Jersey. That's what I tell them. And in fact, when I went to the Native American Open, I asked if I could come as effectively press. And I had to interview over Zoom with the council tribe. And I had to interview with the Shinnecock Council as well when I'm doing another project. And they interviewed me, and they're like, what is your intentions? And then they're like, okay, wait here. And they shut down the Zoom. And I waited like a good 10 minutes. And they come back and they're like, okay, you can come. Because they explained themselves. They said, we've been double-crossed so many times, right? Not only the broken treaties from way back, but researchers will say, I'm going to come in and research your family structure or your energy policy, and they criticize the tribes. And water policy, it's a big one. The tribes have a lot of water rights on their land, and that runs afoul of local municipalities and so on. So they get criticized, and that's one reason why they're building the golf course is water. But anyone else want to answer the final exam? Who do you think of when you think of Native American tribes? Why Thanksgiving?
Because that was the whites meeting the Native.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the narratives of our history, right? Is that the white settlers? Well, that speaks to the Pequots, because that was the tribe. The quote-unquote first Thanksgiving was the Pequots, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So, when the Irish were experiencing famine, the Choctaws sent resources, and the Irish have memorialized that with a beautiful, beautiful sculpture. When I was out at so welcome. We're just having an informal discussion about some research I'm doing on golf and Native Americans. And I'm explaining, it takes a while to explain why that makes sense, all right? And it's because, if you go to the next slide, it's because of the Pequots, right? The Pequots, I would argue, are the most consequential tribe, not only for the first Thanksgiving, but because they're the ones who started really suing for the right for gaming, suing for the right to get more land, right? So it's really an interesting history here. The Pequots were down to two women at one point. And one of the women, Elizabeth George Floof, called in her, I think he was a grandnephew, and on her deathbed, she made him promise that he would continue and try and revive the Pequot Nation. His name was Skip Hayward. This is in Stonington, Connecticut, right down where Foxwoods is. So that was where the reservation was. Where Foxwoods is, it was shrunk down. At one point, it was down to about 200 acres, right? It's now up around almost 2,000 acres. So they fought back and got resources and whatnot. And Skip Hayward promised his grand aunt, I guess her name would be, that he'd try and revive the Pequots. Now, that's an interesting story in itself. I'm not going to go too far down that road, but he did. He started to agitate for the rights of the tribes. And in 1983, Ronald Reagan recognized the Pequot Nation and began to recognize the tribes. And then along comes the Gaming Act of 1988. And Skip Hayward opened a bingo hall. And the bingo hall did very well. And then he built Foxwoods. And Foxwoods is an enormous success. And that's one of the issues here, is that some of the tribes have built casinos that are not successful. So we went to one out in New Mexico when I went out for the Native American Open, and it was kind of dismal, right? Foxwoods is a big deal, right? They bring in Cher and Taylor Swift and everybody. But Skip Hayward, it's kind of an interesting history. Again, I don't want to go too far down this road, but when he started getting money, what did he do? Well, he does want to go into golf, but he starts giving money to politicians. And in fact, he starts buying, with the money from the casino, Foxwoods is the most successful casino in the country, Indian or not, right? And it's an enormous success. And then the Mohegans have since built one. He starts to pony up to the Democratic Party, giving large amounts of money. You know, we're not talking $100. We're talking like $20,000 here, $40,000 there. And then the Boy Scouts are next door in Lake of Isle, and he says, that's reservation land, I want to buy it. And so he gave, so Congress is about to make the decision. On the night before, he gives $100,000 to the Democratic Party. Yeah, he bought it. And that's one of the ironies, right, or one of the complexities of all this, right, is that the other thing is, and this is a knock on the Pequots as well, is that people started coming out of the woodwork, right, and saying, oh, I'm 1/16th, because that was the level that you had to be for a Pequot nation, 1/16th Pequot, and if you could show that, then you got all the benefits that came with that, right? So in fact, when we were out in New Mexico, they were criticizing the Pequots. They're like, 1/16th? That's not right. But anyway, the money comes all these challenges and these complexities, right? The night before the vote on Lake of Isles, he gives $100,000 to the Democratic Party, and needless to say, Clinton, you know, flexed his muscle and said, yeah, you can have that land. And they got it from the Boy Scouts. And now you could argue whether that's a good thing or not. But then they brought in, because they have this money rolling in, they bring in the best architect in the world, Rhys Jones, who's considered the open doctor, right? Each year he goes and fixes the open course, and he's an artist as far as I'm concerned. And he builds two, state-of-the-art courses called Lake of Isle. And there it is. There's a hole there, and you see Foxwoods in the background there. And they move into golf. And so you see Rhys Jones, they were the turtle, the fox, and the Democratic Party. You see Rhys Jones built the bunkers with their tribal symbol, the turtle. And there's one over here that has a fox. It's an absolutely stunning landscape. Just absolutely beautiful in every respect. Very, very high end. And that's where I started researching natives in golf. It really begins in the 90s with the Gaming Act, starts generating revenues, and now a lot of tribes move into it, right? They build courses as a way to generate economy on their land, and that's what the natives consider sovereignty, right? Sovereignty, they consider the 562 nations, they consider themselves their own nations. They are sovereign nations within the United States. Sovereignty is very much, from the native point of view, about economy, right? Creating economy from your own land. That's an interesting point in itself, right? When you think back when we all had family farms and we were generating economy with our land, fishing in our ponds and generating our own food. Maybe we were a bit more independent and sovereign back then, I don't know. Now we go to the McDonald's and all hell broke loose, right? But anyway, it's an interesting question that once you have that economic impact from the land, from the reservation, then you have recovery, right? So the decimation that the native tribes experienced through the broken treaties, through the genocide, the plagues, the wars, there is some measure of recovery going on, right? Even though for a lot of these nations, it's still a struggle. And they're, in a lot of places like North Dakota and elsewhere, we all know there's drug addiction problems, alcohol problems, and golf is just 55 tribes out of this. So that's a tenth of the number of tribes have the golf facilities that are bringing in the money. And again, the casinos and the golf doesn't mean money automatically, right? Foxwoods was unique in that sense. And Skip Hayward was a player and knew how to do it, right? But anyway, so this is Lori Potter, a Pequot, who I interviewed for this project. She says, being able to provide jobs, housing, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, cultural, educational opportunities, secure community are among our highest priorities as a tribe. So the Pequots are kind of an exception, although I want to tell you about the open. So 55, as I noted, now operate golf courses. Some have hosted events by the PGA and the LPGA. So the LPGA has a strong relationship with a number of these facilities. And again, the successful ones are bringing in the best guys to build these things. So Robert Trent Jones Jr., Reese Jones, Ben Crenshaw, Pete Dye, Pete and Alice Dye, Christine Frazier, Jeffrey Brower. These, in my world, these are people who are like artists, right? They come in and they shape a course into a land that is, from my point of view, I don't know if there's any golfers in the room, a delight to walk through, right? It's about being, for me, golf is not about pars and birdies. For me, it's about being outside, being with Monica, being with my family and friends, and being in nature, right? That's what, it's kind of like fishing in a certain sense, right? Just being outside and in nature. So now, there aren't, this is one thing I'm working on now, is there aren't many economic impact studies because, again, the tribes are very reluctant, right, to share. And in fact, there are stories of corruption, needless to say. Once the money starts coming in, people take money. There's corruption up in the northern Midwest with methamphetamine production on some of the reservations. So I'm not going to sugarcoat this in any way. There are challenges. And there are many examples, actually, of tribal chiefs who get in there. All of a sudden, people are like, hey, you know, hire my guy and I'll give you $50,000. And they take it, right? I would, right? No, I'm just kidding. So there's not many studies of economic impact among the tribes. But there is one that I want to show you. And this is the Oneida Nation. And they have a relationship with the LPGA. And they just had an inaugural, I must have skipped a question there. What's the economic impact of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin, Green Bay area? If you guessed 744 million, you're correct. A Norbert College study estimated the tribe's businesses, events, and members directly contribute 494 million, sustained more than 3,000 jobs annually. Indirect spending is factored in. You factor in the velocity of money and so on and so forth. It's 744 million, more than 5,000 jobs being generated by casinos, markets, healthcare, and the Oneida have a beautiful state-of-the-art course called Thornberry, which I'm hoping to go to. So you can, yeah, there it is there. Thornberry Creek at Oneida. And they had an inaugural Thornberry Creek LPGA Classic that had the largest impact, single impact, on that economic generation from the tribe. Right? The LPGA, the PGA, yeah, like it or not, they bring in huge money. Right? You go to those things, I think they estimate that just the merchandise alone, these things, I know. I still haven't convinced Margaret that this is good yet. Margaret's she's going to resist to the end, but you know, like the U.S. Open, the LPGA Women's Final. Oh, the LIV. I'm against the LIV, just so you know. We're in agreement there. I'm against the Saudi-backed LIV for a number of different reasons. But it's like millions of dollars a day in hats and shirts and logo balls and stuff like this. It's huge money that flows into these events. And so the tribes were smart to build these courses that would sustain high-end golf facilities, golf events. There's one I just went to called Santa Ana Pueblo, and here it is here. I went to, in October, the Native American Open. They have their own open each year. And this was at Santa Ana Pueblo in October. This is the tribal chair of the Tamaya Pueblo. That's Jay Garcia. And his friend is the treasurer, Larry Pasquale. I went and played golf with them. We're good friends now. And I'll share the articles. I've published 2 articles from this event, and I have a third coming out. The third one's going to be about this guy here. His name is Jimmy Squire. Jimmy is an amputee, a veteran amputee, missing a leg. And he shows up. I'm writing this story now. Really sweet guy. He's from Oklahoma. He's from the absentee Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma. That's his tribe. And he shows up to agitate for a handicap flight. You all know what that is? That would be a category of the event in which handicapped golfers could play. And so Jimmy shows up and says, hey, we're here. And he goes around and plays handicap flights all around the country. And he wins. He just won a veterans one in Oklahoma, which I'm going to report on. And of course, Larry and Jay, he's extremely enthusiastic and optimistic, Jimmy. He struggled the day I was with him, but they were like immediately, oh yeah, no, next year, definitely, handicap flight, absolutely. And this is Robert Comachit, and he is the nephew of Jim Thorpe, the great athlete Jim Thorpe. He's also from Oklahoma, and he's going to be part of my book as well. I interviewed him about what it's like to be related to Jim Thorpe, the great football, baseball player. And there's a connection to Southbridge about that. Did we talk about that, Margaret? Jim Thorpe, remember, he was the Olympian. He was considered the greatest athlete of all time. He won the decathlon and the pentathlon in 1912. Well, he comes back, and I think it was around 1918 or so. There was a manager in the minor leagues who wintered in Southbridge. I shouldn't go down this road because I'm not remembering his name. But the T&G outed Jim Thorpe as having received money for playing baseball. And that came through Southbridge. That guy dropped a dime. And in the end, it was just all nonsense, and they restored his medals posthumously, right? It was, again, more crimes against the natives, right? Jim Thorpe should not have been stripped of his medals in any way. That was just totally unfair. But it was the T&G that pushed that. So anyway, here's these guys at the Native American Open, Santa Ana Pueblo, absolutely stunning, exquisite golf course. And that's the winner, Eric Fraser. I spent a little time with him. He was the male winner, won by 1 stroke. He's a Navajo. He is trying to make it as a pro. This is another interesting story as well. It ain't easy, right? It ain't easy. I interviewed him. Just go back to Eric for a second, honey. When I got to him, he's like, I got to go. I'm going to the San Diego Open, right? They're just on the go, right? It's 24/7 to try and make a living as a golfer. You know, you think Tiger Woods and those guys have it easy, and you got those mouthpieces like Phil Mickelson sounding off. Those guys are they're the exception. These people are working. They're working really, really hard. And as natives, face challenges that, a white guy from Notre Dame wouldn't face, right? As I said to somebody, if Eric had gone to, UNLV or something like that, or Notre Dame, he'd have the backing of Ford or TaylorMade or Titleist. Yeah, go.
Does the tribe support him?
Yes. Yeah, they have some support. So, for example, Robert Comachit, the relative of Jim Thorpe, he's sponsored by a diner in his home reservation, right? So it's not the kind of money that you would think would follow them, right? Even around here, you might be able to convince like Hanover Insurance or somebody, right? They're getting sponsorships from diners and local energy companies and stuff like that. It's it's discrimination writ large, right? Because go to Sky Song for a minute. This woman, her name is Sky Song Alexis. Her last name is the name of her tribe. She's a Canadian. She won the women's flight by 15 strokes. She's an extraordinarily good golfer. And she did make it and get sponsorship 1 year. They sponsored her to go around to various tournaments, which she won. After she came here and won this one, she had won one previously in Ontario. Exceptional athlete, right? But of course she stopped, like all of us do. She had 2 kids. She's native. She's on a reservation. She's not, again, if she had gone to Notre Dame, Ford or the Catholic Church would be backing her or something like that. They are facing challenges that, we're all white in this room, right? I mean, we don't see it, right? We're getting by, right? She was an absolute delight to spend time with, and again, extraordinary. And so one of the reasons why I'm writing one, in my article about this, I said, hopefully sponsorships will follow. Hopefully, as we make this story known, someone will come up and say, hey, I'm going to sponsor Sky Song for a year. I asked them how much it would cost to be sponsored, just be free to play golf. about $70,000, right? And it's not, you know, that's a good amount of money, but it's not like, you know, $1 million, right? I mean, it's not. So Sky Song was delightful, and she's hoping that she gets the sponsorship. But an energy company in Canada sponsored her for 1 year, and she wins tournaments. So go ahead. Now this is what I write about. I had an essay this week appear. This is Jason Montoya, the first Pueblo PGA member. He is 34 and has spent his life playing golf at Santa Ana, and has now established a golf school called Elevate Golf Mind Body. Delightful guy, and he does programs not only in golf but on nutrition, school prep, and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of holistic approach to. It's not just, hey, go out there and play golf. You got to get, you know, grades in school, learn how to study, learn how to take care of yourself. He's got a whole, and in fact, Nota Begay, who taught Jason, has a whole thing against alcohol. That his whole program is called Water First. I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. But these two, this is Madison Long. She is a Coeur d'Alene, and that's Zachary Blue Eyes is Navajo. This weekend, December 2nd and 4th, they're in a PGA program. They're going to Las Vegas, and the PGA is supporting them in this, where they're going to a showcase for junior golfers who are black and brown from underrepresented groups. They're the only two natives going. They're two of 24 kids who are being supported by a program called Pathways to Progression by the PGA. And I just featured that in one of my articles. And I'll try and share those links at the end if I remember. But those kids were great. Zachary is a very highly decorated young native golfer. He just has picked it up from when he was 7. Goes out and wins tournaments. He won a national title last year, the National Junior Championship, which is Nota Begay's thing. Madison is also just a great golfer, better than me for sure. And she finishes kind of more middling, but Zachary finishes on top. So you see here, he's wearing a medal. He medaled and they didn't even have a junior flight. He medaled in the men's flight at the Native American Open, which is like, you know, I think he came in 3rd behind Eric. And so this project, does anyone have any questions? We can be informal. What's happened is, since I started writing about this, when I started at Lake of Isle and the Pequots, it's kind of popping. I actually have a book contract that I'm working on, and people are really, really interested in this subject. First of all, but among the natives, I find 2 camps. One is, some natives are like, what? They didn't even know this is happening, right? We have golf courses, the golfers, right? Tell me more, right? And then there's the subculture of the golf folks. And they're hungry for this. When I sent the essay on the Native American Open, the responses I got from the team out there at Santa Ana was just like, this is incredible. You know, they couldn't believe they were getting that coverage, right? And they're like, this is stunning, well done. You know, they just are thrilled that they're getting the coverage. So Nota Begay he's not the first. Some people say he's the first, but Nota Begay won 4 times on the PGA Tour. He was Tiger Woods' roommate at Stanford, right? They won 2 national championships together. He is Navajo, and he plays at Santa Ana. And so all the people I'm working with are friends of. In fact, I'm in touch with his brother, Clint Begay, who runs exactly that. It's called the NB3 Fit, Golf Fit program, right? So they identify young kids who want to golf, and they take, 15 or 20 each year, give them good gear, right? That's a big issue. Give them nutritional programs, right? Because that's a big issue for native tribes. Give them school prep, right? So that they, because very few people reach the level where you can really make money in golf, right? They're gonna become teachers. They're gonna become maybe run the pro shop or whatever if they want to stay in the industry, right? There's a lot of jobs, but it's very rare that someone gets to that level, that elite level, where you're actually making a lot of money. But again, these two were identified to be part of a PGA program called PGA Pathways to Progression. It's a year-long program. And I celebrate this in the essay I published this week in ICT. Again, I'll share those links if I can get them. There are 24 people of color, right, from underrepresented groups who the PGA identified and said, we want to, they took them to TPC Sawgrass, which is in Florida, one of the big PGA courses. They did a week-long training in college prep, nutrition, and self-confidence programs like that. They all played there. And then they gave them grants. The PGA gave them grants to hire coaches and get gear. And in fact, in the essay, Zachary talks about this in my essay, how he's going out to tournaments and he's playing against kids who live on country clubs. They're white kids who live on country clubs, and they hire coaches, and the parents are pushing them out there, and they're playing with the Pro V1 ball and all that stuff. And he's like, I didn't have that, right? Well, now the PGA is creating a program for these guys and these kids. And so this weekend is the showcase. So NBC is doing a program on it Sunday. I'm in touch with the vice president of player development at the PGA is a gentleman named Kenyatta Ramsey is running the program. And in fact, I was emailing with him today, wishing him luck for the weekend. But he said that there's a program on NBC Sunday at 1 that they're going to feature this program. And I'm in touch with these kids' parents, and they're all really jazzed, right? Because they're getting everything, hotel, flights, gear. And the showcase is for college, right? So all the golf college coaches from around the country will be there. And hopefully, well, Zachary's a junior, so he's really ahead of the game. Madison's a senior in high school. Hopefully on Monday morning, she's going to wake up and have a scholarship, right, to one of the good golf programs, right? That's what they're hoping for. And they also, the PGA sees this as an ongoing program. So Kenyatta said, this is my last job. He'll never leave this job, right? The PGA really wants to do this for more and more kids for exactly that reason, Don. Get these kids out there. We talked about this at my last presentation where, why isn't Southbridge opening up Cohasset to kids? Because if you got asthma problems, right? If you got focus problems, if you got depression issues among the youth, get them outside, right? Get them in the fresh air. I mean, that's my rap on golf, right? Even though I like the game. I mean, I just like being outside and breathing fresh air. And that's what some kids don't have. They don't have access to that stuff. So my argument in all of this, again, I'm hoping that my book will be out hopefully this time next year. Margaret will be here, and I'll have a book in hand. The book is called Native Links, The Surprising History of Our First People in Golf. And I've uncovered some really amazing stuff, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But one thing about the Native American Open I want to tell you. I love sports. Don and I coached town soccer. Do you remember that story about Wilson Reich saying sorry to the young black boy? You remember that story at all? Monica and I talk about this. Anyway, I was coaching soccer with Don and everybody, and Wilson Reich was like a rotating captain one day. And there was a black boy on the other team, and they went out to shake hands and flip the coin. And Wilson, out of the blue, unprompted, goes up to the black, yeah. He goes up to the black boy and says, I'm sorry for what my people did to your people. No, I swear to God. It's really one of my favorite stories in life. I love that story. And Monica and I bring it up every once in a while. Remember when Wilson did that? I mean, talk about just natural, goodness and moral, dignity, right? Anyway, I'm at the awards ceremony for the Native American Open, and I sit down next to Bowman Wisdom. Bowman Wisdom. He's an Oklahoman, 80 years old, 81 years old, was in the Army at Fort Hood with Elvis Presley because the Army was the only way out of the reservation. He graduated high school, he joined the Army, was at Fort Hood in Texas with Presley, had all these great stories. And he loved golf, right? So we got to talk, we hit it off, and we're sitting there eating our bison burgers together, and we just are really rapping. And his family's there. He felt like the competition was too stiff, right? So he wanted a flight for 80-plus-year-olds, right? And so we get to talking, and I said my usual rap, I'm just a poor white guy from New Jersey, right? And he says, the white people, he says, the worst thing the white people brought here is Christianity and alcohol. And so we started rapping on that. I said, well, you know, Christianity we're going to have to talk about. You know, alcohol, well, I'm going to stay away from the bars since you said that, right? And, but he's introducing me to all these sober golfers, including Jim Thorpe's nephew, right, Robert Comanche. And he brought up like 4 or 5 guys who came up and said their first line was, I'm sober 7 years, or I'm sober 9 years, right? Because in the Native American community,
Rampant. People don't even understand. I don't know if it's a genetic issue. From what I've read and understood, there's more to it. There could be a genetic link to the...
I think that that's pretty well established, but
Yeah.
I don't know the science of it to talk too much about it. But,
Right.
but also just the economic and social challenges that they faced, right? Where addiction becomes, you know, we see that in a white ghetto as well, right? But Noda Begay, to go back to Noda, who's now a very, very successful commentator, course designer, and runs his foundation is at Santa Ana. And I didn't know that when I got there. I got there and I see NB3, that's what he calls himself, NB3, water first, big truck. Big truck just says water first. And I learned that Noda Begay had a problem with alcohol. He won 4 times on the tour and then spun out, right? Got a DUI, crashed his car, and he didn't want to be the drunken Indian. You know, he didn't want to be that, that meme, right? And so he cleaned himself up. And in doing so, realized that he could have a better career as a commentator, you know, for all the DEI stuff, obviously, and also representing the tribal nations and all that stuff. So he became a commentator, left golf. He developed a back problem as well. It's a longer story. But anyway, his program there is about sobriety, right? In part, healthy living, nutrition, and water first. That's the name of his program. So when the native golfers arrive at Santa Ana, as I did, there it is. His truck is right there, NB3, water first. And that's one of his big deals. And so that was the interesting conversation with Bowman, was about alcohol and Christianity. We didn't get into that. But anyway, I told him the story. I told him the story of Wilson. I said, I have to tell you my favorite story in sports. And I said, this young boy in the soccer field went up to a black boy and just said, I'm sorry for what my people did to your people. And I said, Bowman, that's the way I feel, you know. And he totally was down with that. And he was going to go back to Oklahoma and start his own Open, which was going to be bigger than the Native American Open. He was a really lot of fun to be with. So anyway, my argument is, if the arc of history bends towards justice, right? That's the great line of Martin Luther King. The resurgence of Native American tribes is a shining example, in my view. That the game of golf has aided in this process is not a surprise to historians of a sport that, by its nature, right, if it's played well, requires truth-telling, humility, and a love of the land. And that's the argument of my book, basically, is that this resurgence of tribal golf facilities, aided by the casinos, sometimes, some tribes have golf without casinos, is spurring an economic sovereignty in some areas that is benefiting the kids. You know, they're creating an industry of teaching and healthy living and get through school. That's one thing Bowman said again and again. Education first, right? That's what I tell my kids. It's not golf, it's education. Yeah, so, okay, so I'll pause here and see if anyone wants to ask any questions or discuss things. But in my research, after I started writing about Native Americans and golf courses, which again is popping, like people are buying the articles and people are really interested in this subject, which is good for me. I discovered this guy. Oscar Bunn is a Shinnecock Montauk Indian, native, east end of Long Island, and we've been down there. I've been down to meet his relatives, and the Shinnecock Reservation is here, and then the Shinnecock Hills Golf Course is like literally 50 yards away. And that's stolen land. The golf course is stolen land, needless to say. But it's also supposedly, according to the people I talk to or listen to, it's sublime. It's one of the most beautiful courses in the world, right? All the architects say that. It's the number one, Shinnecock Hills. He helped build it, him and the Shinnecock tribesmen, right? So the colonists came in, did them dirty on some land deal, right? They get the hills, and they build their golf course on the hills. The Shinnecock Reservation is, actually the Shinnecock Reservation is quite beautiful. They have the bay, but that's shrunk down from what they originally had, right? He was born in 1878. He didn't meet his father. His father was a whaler named Oscar Smith Bunn, who died in a shipwreck when Oscar was quite young, like a year old. He grew up on the reservation and avoided the fates of a lot of his tribesmen by getting on the work crews, and they built Shinnecock Hills. Then he began to caddie, and he was a gifted athlete, and so everyone started noticing. So that was all being run by a family called the Dunns, Dunn and Bunn. It can get confusing, but the Dunns were Scottish. Willie Dunn, Seymour Dunn. They were part of that wave that came over. Harry Varden, that came over to teach golf and build the courses, right? So he fell under the tutelage of Willie Dunn, who was a golf club maker, and then later Seymour Dunn. And they started noticing, oh, Oscar can really play this game. And so he played in the second U.S. Open and the fifth U.S. Open. So in 1896, he represented Shinnecock Hills at Shinnecock Hills. And in 1899, the first U.S. Open played south of the Mason-Dixon. He represented Shinnecock Hills again in Roland Park, Baltimore. So he's a gifted golfer. And then he followed Seymour Bunn out to the Adirondacks and taught golf out there at Lake Placid, Saranac Lake. He had a job in Jacksonville, Florida, a couple winters. He set course records in Connecticut and Florida. And then I just finished a chapter in which Harry Varden, the great English golfer, he didn't call himself English. He said he was a Jersey man. He's from the island of Jersey. He came over and did a tour in 1900. And he toured from March to November. He played 90 matches for $500 and a bottle of scotch for each. And he took all comers. He went from Florida to Colorado to Chicago, and he met up with Oscar Bunn at Lake Placid. And so I'm uncovering this. It's really a fascinating story, and I'm finding some things that aren't really known. It was known that they played, right, and that Varden won the first match. But I recently uncovered that they had a second match, and it's documented in some newspapers out in Lake Placid, and Bunn won the second match. And so I have a chapter on this, and I'm suggesting, in my chapter, I'm suggesting, well, they might have just hit it off, right? Because Oscar was known to be very jolly. He had the first stick-built house in the reservation. He and his wife, Mary Della Bunn, had a room. Half the house was a music room. They had a piano, and they liked to dance, and they liked to socialize. And he was, skilled enough, not only as a golfer, but socially, to make a living as a golf pro, despite the enormous challenges that a Shinnecock Montauk native would have had at that time. And so I call up, I go out and I meet his great-grandnephew, who's an artist, like a really successful artist, has his own gallery. His name is David Bunn Martine. He studied with Robert Rauschenberg, Charles Earl Wilson. And I said, what about a portrait of Oscar? And he said, well, of course, And I said, well, how much would that be? And he's like, well, I get about $9,000. And I'm like, yeah, can't do that. But there was a lawyer involved. Allison Singh was involved. And I said, Allison, could we put this deal together? She's like, she's more money than I am. And she's like, nah, I can't do $9,000, right? So me, being a poor Jersey boy, I called the USGA Museum and Library. And I said, hey, Oscar Bunn, you know that story? And they're like, not really. And I shared my chapter with them. And they had a record of him in the opens, right? And I said, would you be interested in a portrait of Oscar Bunn done by one of his relatives? Her name is Rosemary Maravets, is the director. And Margaret will know, I don't know about Southbridge, but some libraries have acquisition funds and museums and one. You want to get in on that? And they said, well, how much would it be? And I developed a relationship with Victoria Neno, who's a senior historian there. And I had a conference call with them. They said, how much would it be? And I said, well, $9,000 plus shipping and framing. They're like, we'll do it. They didn't even blink. They didn't even blink. It was not a, and again, that goes back to the USGA, which holds the US Open, tens of millions of dollars in merchandise alone, right? I mean, so they got money. Anyway, this is it. This is just finished, and this is based on the 2 existing photographs of Oscar Bunn. We're going to go see this over the holiday. He's just finished this, like literally this week. Yeah. There's 2 pictures of Oscar Bunn. One is on his bicycle, and you can see he's wearing a shirt and tie, which I never noticed until David painted the portrait. So he's on his way to work at the club, right? And then the other picture of him is in Indian garb at an Indian Shinnecock event, a ritual of some kind. And so using the technique of his teacher, Charles Earl Wilson, who's very famous for representations of Native Americans and cowboys in Oklahoma, he used that technique to create this portrait. This, the Brooklyn Eagle did a linotype type of thing. You can't tell this is Oscar, but there was a article about Oscar teaching golf, and they ran him swinging. And so the 3 images that we know of Oscar are incorporated into this, this portrait, which will hang at the USGA Museum and Library, yeah. David's very reserved, and again, like a lot of natives, he doesn't know how to take a poor boy from Jersey, but I keep on saying, I'm just so happy about this project. I can't, and I keep on calling, I keep on emailing Victoria. I'm like, when are we going to have a reception? We got to have a reception and really have an unveiling and really bring this to light. And, everyone so far is like, well, right now it's drying. And so, in fact, this is not the final version. The final version has some beach plums right there. But, yeah, it's really it's going to be the last chapter of my book, will be that unveiling at the museum. But we're going to go down and see David at his gallery over the holiday and see this up close and in person. So again, that's all a way of saying I think the subject is worth exploring in a lot of different ways, right? Not only because you have this history. It's not only Oscar Bunn. I've written about other figures along the way. Frank Dufina. He was part Choctaw up in Michigan. Rod Curl, the first native to win on the PGA Tour. Rod Curl's sons. Steve McDonald. So you have this chronology through time going back to this is the first American-born golf pro. He is the first American. Up to that point, it was all the Scots and the Brits. He's the first American-born golf teacher, and no one knows that, right? Because of racism and discrimination, right? And so when you tell that to people, in fact, whatever, I don't want to carry on too much, but when I'm revealing this story, and there's a big journal called the Golfer's Journal, it appears that they're going to run this story. But when you tell, those guys are sponsored by Titleist and Acushnet and all that. You tell them this, and their minds explode. They can't believe it. They think golf is just a white boy country club game, but you go back through history, and you find this really surprising chronology of natives in golf. And so from Oscar, there was a gentleman by the name of Frank Dufina who taught golf on Mackinac Island in Michigan, and he was the longest serving golf pro in history. And that's recognized by the PGA. So he's known a little more than Oscar, but he just knew it from the start. He wanted to be a golf teacher. He started teaching at a small club on Mackinac Island when he was like 14, and he just wanted to stay there. And he taught until 1963. So from like 1912 to 1963, Frank Dufina taught at this club on Mackinac Island. Never left the island other than for a few tournaments. And so it's really a fascinating history. And anyway, comments or questions? I know we're at time. Margaret, thank you so much. I love coming down here and sharing my research. And thank you for the support. As I said, my book will be out hopefully at this time next year. And I'll be out with a box of books in my trunk. Again, thanks for the Southbridge Library and Friends of the Library. And I'll come back anytime. Universal reconciliation and healing through golf. That's my... Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Martha.